Welcome to the Contractor Counsel Podcast.
Welcome to the Contractor Counsel Podcast with Joshua Irvine of Irvine Legal. Joshua is a Utah business and tax attorney who serves as outside general counsel to construction and trades companies, helping owners manage contracts, collections, liens, and financial systems. I'm Lisa Mosby, your host, and today we're talking about Utah construction liens. Joshua will go over what they actually do, how the deadlines work, and where contractors lose leverage by missing critical steps. Joshua, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Joshua, before we get into deadlines and paperwork, what is a construction lien in Utah, and what is it actually designed to do for a contractor?
Yeah, it's a great question. And every state probably calls it by a different name. Some states call it a mechanic's lien. Some states call it a notice of claim. Utah calls it a construction lien. And essentially what it does is kind of puts people on notice or asserts a claim for an amount that a contractor or somebody that was involved in the construction process, either before or during, is entitled to some amount of money for the work or the services provided. So there are kind of two varieties, the pre-construction and the construction, but it falls under the same umbrella of a construction lien.
And when a contractor realizes that payment may become an issue, how early should they be thinking about lien rights?
And probably before they start the job, because frankly, in my experience, if the first time they think about a construction lien is when somebody has withheld payment from them, they have probably already missed a number of critical dates and tasks that might make it difficult, if not impossible, to actually use the construction lien process. Every state is different, and so Utah is unique in this way. Some states might not have some of those preliminary hurdles that you have to make sure you follow, but because Utah does, if you don't plan ahead, I guess it's kind of like my elementary school teacher, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And this is very true in the construction lien space.
I know you've leaned into it and saying that Utah has specific notice requirements and timelines, but what are the key deadlines contractors need to understand before they lose their ability to file?
There really are probably three main deadlines that they have to follow, or at least be aware of. The first is what's called the pre-lien or the preliminary notice deadline. And so Utah law requires that there be a preliminary notice filed with the Utah State Construction Registry. And this has been in place for a number of years, but I'm always surprised how few contractors are aware of it still. And you have to file this notice no later than 20 days from starting your job or doing your work. You can kind of file it a little bit late if there's a lot of work left to do on the job, but the basic rule is the one you want to follow. You follow it file it no later than 20 days, and you'll be good to go. So that's the first one. If you don't do that one, you don't even have lien rights later at all. So that's critical. The second one is really to find out if somebody files what's called a notice of completion. Because if somebody, usually the general contractor, sometimes the property owner, if they file a notice of completion, then your timeline for filing a construction lien is cut in half. If you aren't aware of whether that thing is filed, then you may not even realize that timeline just got cut in half. And why it matters is because as a practical business, a lot of times these contractors are a little bit patient and they're a little bit willing to wait a few weeks or a couple of months until they get paid. But if you're behind the eight ball with your bookkeeping, with your invoicing, with your actual, following up on payments, you could easily run into 90 days without really realizing what you did. But assuming that that's not the case and that notice is not filed, then the third deadline is 180 days, no matter what. From the time that you finish your work on the job, you have 180 days to file your construction lien. And then there's a couple of things after that to make sure you do it the right way. But Those are the three big deadlines: pre-lien, notice of completion, and then 180 days from when you're done.
And Joshua, how does the process differ for general contractors versus subcontractors or suppliers?
Utah is unique in that we don't actually distinguish. And so if you are pre-construction, so engineers, architects, you can use this process. If you're a regular construction, swinging a hammer, throwing up some plywood, then that's the traditional construction. And those who provide supplies and materials as well, all of them are treated the same under the law.
And what documentation should a construction company have in place before filing a lien to protect itself if the matter escalates?
Well, I know this is self-serving for the attorney to say, but the first thing is to make sure you have a good contract. I think probably multiple times a day I talk with potential clients or current clients about whether they have contracts, and even if they have one, whether they were signed, because sometimes that doesn't happen. Once things are signed and once things are clear about the scope of work, then sometimes making sure you document the changes. Essentially, if you're looking later towards being able to prove how much money should you have received and then being able to account for how much money you did not receive, is really what underlies the entire idea of a construction lien.
And then where do contractors most commonly make mistakes in the lien process that weakens their position?
Well, obviously, missing the deadlines is going to be a huge issue. The second one, because I get it, that this isn't always intuitive sometimes, but is actually filing the documents related to the wrong kind of property. So in Utah, when you file preliminary liens or construction liens, you have to have an address. You have to have what's called a parcel ID number, or maybe even the full legal description for a piece of real estate that's being improved by your work. And countless times I see people file these things on the right deadlines, but they attach it to the wrong pieces of property. And if you do it and attach it to the wrong pieces of property, number one, you're going to get in trouble and you'll have to be told to take it off. But number two, you can't fix it either because you filed it right, the right time, but you filed at the wrong place. So being organized enough to track both of those things, the deadlines and the legal details for where these things are supposed to be attached.
So let's say that it's all done correctly. Once the lien is filed, what usually happens next in the real world practice? Does it trigger payment negotiation or litigation? What are the next steps?
Yeah, and I mean, in my experience anyway, I would say probably 80% of those that are the recipient of a construction lien notice magically start negotiating the monies that are in dispute. And for that other 20%, unfortunately, sometimes the negotiations are too far apart and you have to go to court in order to enforce those liens. Because essentially, the reason why those liens are so attractive and why, I wish all contractors would use them is because it gives them leverage to potentially sell real estate in satisfaction of their debt, of what they're owed. Now, if that's my personal home, if I hired a contractor and I magically get this notice saying you're going to sell my house if I don't pay you what I owe, I think I'm going to wake up and try to figure out some payment terms. And that's been my experience. The vast majority, it encourages an ability to actually sit down and talk about payments. And one of the reasons why I think that's the case is because even after you file a construction lien, you're given, at least in Utah, you're given another 6 months, another 180 days until you are required to file a lawsuit to move that construction lien to its full enforcement. And during that 6 months, there's a lot of discussion that goes on.
I always like to bring this home and help folks to have a real world story to understand it through. Can you share an example of a situation where a contractor either preserved their leverage by handling the lien properly, or they lost it because something was missed?
Sure. And I could probably give either of those on any given day, but let's give the positive example of one that actually made it work the right way. So a lot of our clients hire us and we take care of that preliminary notice requirement because they are so many and they are so quick and frankly, they're so easy to forget and just to overlook as you're excited about starting a new job and a new project. You forget about filing this one thing and then the deadlines pass. And so I can think of a couple of clients recently that we were able to get them all of their money that they were owed because they had been working with us for a number of years and we'd been managing this preliminary filing process for them. And so it simply got to the point that they were not getting any response fully on the invoices that they were sending. And we were able to go back and double check and make sure all of the pre-liens were done the right way and filed on time. And so we got to record a construction lien, send out a notice, and they got paid within 2 weeks in full. They didn't have to file a lawsuit. It just simply meant that they had to have put in place systems long ago so that they could actually reap the benefit of it today. And I don't know that the business would have failed without that, but that's super stressful for a business owner to do a lot of work and not potentially get fully paid when they've done that, when they've paid payroll, when they've made other commitments as a business. So we were super happy, and obviously they were super excited that we could give them that result.
And Joshua, for contractors who want to be proactive rather than reactive, what systems should they put in place so that liens or lien rights are tracked and protected automatically on every project?
Yeah, and there's probably not a one size fits all, but you're getting into the areas that I like truly salivate over, which is this idea of systems within a business. I think the first step, as I talk to a lot of business owners, is for them to realize that they have a business and they need to treat it and run it instead of just being the guy that's swinging the hammer or the girl that's up there painting the walls, that you actually need to run this thing the right way. So there are 2 or 3 systems I think that they can put in place, whether they do this internally or whether they outsource some of it. But all of these systems interrelate in order to make this overall process work. So the first one obviously is the contract system, making sure that they have things signed the right way on time before they start doing the jobs. And then once that's done, they obviously have to trigger their scheduling person. And that scheduling person might be who notifies the pre-lien filer, wherever that is. And then the second part is to make sure that all of the changes that occur throughout the job are properly documented so that they can invoice. So you flow into your third system, invoicing, billing. You have to do it regularly. You have to do it accurately. You can't just send a dollar number. Like, you need it itemized in some way so that the person receiving it knows what they're paying for and happily will pay for it, or at least they know what they're being asked to pay for. And then kind of the follow-up is really that project management piece where you have to track those deadlines. And when you're done with jobs, that you have to remind the individuals tracking the overall construction lien to go back and double check, were we fully paid? And if not, how much is still outstanding? And they have to set up reminders or calendars so that they don't miss those deadlines that trail unfortunately, after they're off the job, and they sometimes forget because they're working on new jobs. So those are 3 or 4 systems they have to talk to each other. They have to integrate it. So I've seen people do it successfully by hiring staff and training them. I've seen people do it successfully by outsourcing all of that stuff, or a hybrid. Some of our clients have us do part and they do part. There's no right or wrong way. It's just a matter of you have to have these or you're just going to take a gamble.
And how do you encourage maybe a mom and pop, somebody who is working from their home? They're still doing a lot of projects, but they don't necessarily have these systems. They do their quotes, and then when that's done and the work is done, they do their billing, but they don't have a lien system in place versus, a mid-range business, a large business, or a mega business. How do you work with each of those different groups of people to make sure that they have the necessary systems? And when do they start them? Is it on the first project or the 15th?
Yeah. The way I think about systems is when when the right time to put a system in place is probably when either you don't want to do it yourself or that you can afford to hire somebody else because your time makes more money doing different tasks. And one of those two scenarios, I work with companies that are, hey, I started 6 months ago and now I have 2 or 3 jobs. So I want somebody to help me manage the jobs now. And they bring us on board, up to companies that are doing in the tens of millions of dollars a year in revenue. Our procedure, frankly, is the same. And how we work with them is the same. It might scale differently because a bigger company has more of these pre-liens to file, but the concept is the same. And the way in which we work with our clients to set up an affordable monthly price so that they can have these things structured and systemized, that's kind of how we do it. So I haven't found a company that it won't work for. It's just a matter of, do they want to integrate these new ways of handling into their own current business?
Thank you for that. I think it shows that it's accessible for everyone, that you don't have to do without. We appreciate your insights today. Thank you for your guidance through this process.
You bet.
That's it for today's episode of the Contractor Counsel Podcast. If you're a construction or trades business owner in Utah and want to make sure your lien rights are protected before a payment issue escalates, you can learn more about Joshua and Irvine Legal at irvine-legal.com. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, leave a review, and subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. We'll see you there.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.